Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. We're doing something a little bit different today, and I actually brought in one of my clients, Caitlin Bauer, to share all about her experience going through an IUI. And I feel like she has an even different sort of outlook because she has to travel an exceptionally far way to get to her clinic. So she walked us through what coming to that decision was like, what things she had to think about and process. And what the actual process of IUI was like for her, because this is a question we actually get quite a bit inside Fertility Confidence Method when women are in that place of maybe this is what's next for me. I'm having those conversations with my doctor, but I'm feeling a bit nervous. I'm feeling a little bit scared. I don't actually know, like, what is it like? They kind of walk you through like the medication, but they don't actually really walk you through what it's going to be like for you. So I was so appreciative of Caitlin to come in, share her experience with all of us. If you are also in that thought process of maybe this is the next step for me, I think this episode is really going to help you, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, Caitlin. Welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast.
Hello. Thank you.
I am so excited. We're going to chat all about IUI today, but why don't you start with just sharing a little bit of background for our listeners, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I'm Caitlin Buer. I live in the States in Montana, and I'm a high school, well, actually a K-12 principal. My husband and I have been on our fertility journey for over 3 years now. We've done the IUI process. We have gotten pregnant naturally, which ended in a miscarriage, and pregnant a second time through IUI, which also ended in a miscarriage, which is what kind of led me to FCM and Dr. Kelsey. I felt like we did all the tests, we did all the things, and things just still were not going the way we wanted it to. And I knew there had to be something underlying that the tests weren't finding. And I was really focusing on the natural part. Like I really felt that my body could do it. It showed me it could do it. It just couldn't sustain. And I wanted to figure out as naturally as possible what we could do to get our baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that's like a very common sentiment with our clients is like, I'm open to these other avenues, but I want to make sure like I'm doing everything I can on my end first and like during the process as well.
I agree.
So why don't we talk? Okay, so we're going to focus today on like giving you, the listeners, the ins and outs of what an IUI is like. And I had this idea a couple months ago of like, let's actually just have a conversation around the process with IUI and egg retrieval and FET and fresh transfer, because so often when we're doing office hours in FCM, that's a big question for women when they're thinking about taking the next step. It's like, well, what is it like? Like there's this fear of the unknown, which is so valid. Like, and oftentimes we're only really hearing negative experiences in the infertility space. And then that's just compounding on the fear. So for you and your husband, Caitlin, when you were making the decision around taking this next step, how did you guys come to that place of feeling ready?
Well, we were referred to a fertility clinic after a year of trying, and our OBGYN, we did some tests. We got referred to the fertility clinic, and it was just kind of, we got to the point where they said, here are your options, like a medicated IUI or medicated natural, like try on your own.
Yep.
And we just said, you know what? We would like to go the most aggressive that is the least invasive at the same time.
Yeah.
And we just kind of dove head first. Like, this is what the doctor recommended. I look at it now and I wish I would have been a little more educated on it. Like you said, a lot of people don't know, just because I think I could have made a lot of changes on my own to start before jumping into it.
Yeah.
I'm not disappointed or look back on it and say, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done this. But we just decided we're tired of waiting. Let's do the most aggressive that we can with where we're at right now.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the wrong decision, right? Like everyone's journey with deciding what's next for them is so personal and so different. And wanting to get there quicker, like that's valid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
If we could all make sure we're picking the quicker route, I think we would all pick the quicker route. And if that's presented that way, like that makes sense. Did you guys have any hesitations going into the IUI process?
I think for the most part, hesitation wise, it was money. You know,
Yeah,
that was our kind of our one, like, okay, can we afford this? Yes, it's way cheaper than going IVF, but it
yeah,
still is almost a $1,500 to $2,000 investment per month
yeah,
if you do more than one. So that was probably our biggest hesitation. I really just put my trust in the doctors at our
yeah.
fertility clinic that this was the right step for us. So for the most part, I really didn't hesitate about much else.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I ask this and feel free to like say pass, but I'm in the thick of like filming our new male fertility portion. And so I'm curious, did your husband have any like thoughts or hesitations moving into this piece?
He wasn't super excited when we said we have to do a sperm analysis.
Yeah.
And he goes, "What?" And then we explained it. The doctor explained it, said this is a necessary piece.
Yeah.
He actually was referred to a specialist, a urologist, after his tests came back. But then that urologist found nothing abnormal. So that
Mhm.
was a positive to see. So, I mean, he wasn't super excited, but he definitely was on board to do what he needed to do.
He took one for the team. When I
Yeah.
was putting together our like information for this week, I was laughing because so often I think when men hear like you have to give a sperm sample, they think of those like creepy doctors' offices with like the old porn and someone's going to be listening on the outside of the
Yes.
window. And I'm like, no, it's not like that anymore. It's not the early 90s. Like you can probably do your sample at home, which is just
Yes.
so much better. And then when you guys are venturing into IUIs, now that's not a one-time thing for him, right? That's happening every cycle. So the first one's always the hardest for any men that are listening. Honestly, like I think the first one is always the hardest. And then after that, it's just like, whatever, we got to do what we got to do. And like with anything, even with the IUI process and that unknown sort of fear of not really knowing what's going to happen, I think there's that too with the semen analysis that's important to acknowledge.
Yes. And the awkward factor goes away after the first one.
Yeah, yeah, you just get used to it by that point.
Yes.
Okay, so you went to the clinic. The clinic said these are kind of your two options. You guys came together and decided that the least invasive but most aggressive felt good for you. What was the actual IUI process like for you guys?
It overall was pretty simple. I didn't really know what to expect. They walked me through it very well. My doctor did. So we live about 5 hours from our fertility clinic.
I
So
forgot about that. Oh,
yes. So that added a little extra planning and really
yeah.
living by the calendar. But I mean, my first cycle, I did use Clomid for the cycle day 3 through 7. And then we did a trigger shot after my ultrasound on day 12. So, they did the ultrasound. Then my doctor looked at it, said, okay, we're going to wait 2 days. Well, actually, with my first cycle, I didn't even do the trigger shot because my eggs were not growing.
Hmm.
And they called and just said, it's not worth you spending the money because it's probably not going to happen. We'll try again next cycle.
Okay.
So then the second one, they started me on letrozole, which I had much better success with. Luckily, I didn't really have some of the side effects that a lot of women have on Clomid and letrozole. I didn't feel like I did.
Good.
And we did the same process with that. Overall, I was very nervous about the trigger shot just because I'd never given myself a shot before.
Mhm.
And the first time it was just like adrenaline because they called me at school, I was at work, and they said, you need to go take your trigger shot in 30 minutes and then you need to be here tomorrow. And I said, okay, I will go home. And it just all happened. I did the trigger shot. We jumped in the car that night, drove the 5 hours, spent the night, did the IUI, and came home.
Yeah.
And so that also wasn't successful. Then they kept me with the letrozole, and then they eventually added Follistim
Mhm.
injections, which actually was successful with that. So I responded really well to that, and I'd figured out the injections by then. So it seemed like it was a piece of cake. My husband, on the other hand, he said, I can't give you the shot. You have to do that to yourself. And
Aw.
finally, it was like my fourth one with the injections, I said, you need to come be a part of this. Like, I'm not expecting you to like give me the shot, but
Yeah.
you are just as involved in this as I am. And we both need to be there when we do it. And he was
Yeah.
on board with that.
Oh, that's good.
So overall, I mean, the process, it was pretty simple. They laid it out for me very well with my, the letrozole, the injections. They gave me lots of different resources on how to give yourself injections. They
Mhm.
were pretty good about, calling after the ultrasounds to give me results pretty quickly. And not everyone was as fast paced as the first one.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would be, okay, in 2 days you need to be here. So it was an overall, I thought it was an easy process.
Yeah. And that's good that they were at least not after the first one, a little bit more enough to give you like some time to plan, given that you
Yes.
live so far away. I totally
Yes.
forgot that. I knew that and I forgot when you said that. I was like, oh my gosh, it just adds such another layer of complication to needing to be somewhere.
Mhm.
And I know from working with clients here, sometimes you'll go to the clinic and they're like, oh, come back. You're not quite ready. Come back tomorrow. And like, they can't really do that with you guys,
Yep.
right? So there's like that other layer of complexity there too.
Yeah, it definitely adds to it.
Okay, so you go through, you do the letrozole, they tell you to do the trigger shot. Walk us through when you go back for the IUI. What's that process like?
Yep. So they would schedule it for me in the morning so that I could go home that same day and didn't have to miss as much work, which was great.
Yeah.
We would go to the lab where Chase would have to do his sperm sample. And then it was about an hour and a half wait for them to wash the sperm. And so we would walk over to Starbucks and we'd get our breakfast. And it was this little routine we
Yeah.
had. We'd eat our breakfast and have our coffee, and then the lab would call us and we'd pick it up and they'd bring this nice little black cooler out to him that he had to sign and say it was his. And I checked, he checked, the lab checked. Then we would drive over to the fertility clinic because they weren't in the same building at the time. And then we'd check in. I would go back and the doctor would make sure it was Chase's sperm. And then they would essentially, 5 minutes of, they'd insert and I'd sit there for 10 minutes and then they'd say, okay, you can go on your way now.
It really is that simple. Like we
Yes.
build it up so much in our heads, but it really is that simple. If you're comfortable sharing, is there any discomfort, pain, cramping at all with the IUI procedure?
I didn't notice too much. When they inserted the sperm through the catheter, they always said like there will be a little bit of cramping. And there was, you
Yeah.
could definitely tell there was something going in,
Yeah.
but it wasn't to the point where I needed, like Tylenol or Advil or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And what about after? Because that's something women always ask me is, well, what to expect after? Like, can I go back to work? Am I going to be, should I lie on the couch for the rest of the day? Did you ever get any spotting? Like things like that? Like, what was it like after?
For mine, I didn't get any spotting after mine. Luckily, I was able to sit in the car for the next 5 hours.
Yeah.
Mine was
Yeah.
pretty relaxed. They always kind of recommended, they said, you can go back to work if you'd like.
Yeah.
Don't go do a strenuous workout afterwards. Like
Yeah.
kind of take it on and it's not that I couldn't, like I felt good enough to do it, but they said, just let your body relax. You don't want to add extra stress to it at this point. But by the next day, I was back to my normal workout routine, back to work.
Yeah, perfect. And that's important because we do see in the research how physical activity and movement is so beneficial for blood flow. And I think a lot of women, when they enter the realm of IUIs, they get nervous to move their body and feel like in that whole 2 week wait, they just have to like be a potato and stay still. And that's actually detrimental to the process from a blood flow perspective. So we have to find this balance of like, we don't want to overdo it. We want to like focus on moderate or low intensity movement for sure. We don't want to pick up any new like strenuous hobbies either, but we also don't want to sit still for that whole time. So that's good that your body felt well enough to get back into your normal routine.
Yes, the only real time during the whole like cycle process that I felt that I couldn't really do as much was like the day or two leading up before I had to take my trigger shot with the follistim injections, I definitely could feel that I had larger eggs than I was used to.
Yeah.
I felt full almost. And
Yeah.
so I could do the workouts, but I just erred on the side of caution and was like, I'm going to go for a walk rather than a run.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good reminder of like listening to your body is so
Mhm.
important because everyone's going to be a little bit different. And absolutely, once we introduce injectable stims, there's just that added growth, likely more numbers, and there's always some added like fluid retention. I
Mhm.
find with Follistim and Gonal F that we don't get as much of with Letrozole and Clomid, and we don't like, there's no point in making you more uncomfortable really.
Mhm.
So just kind of paying attention. That's perfect. Okay. What are some general like tips and tricks, through your time of IUIs that you could share with our listeners who are thinking of going this route?
Well, like one would be don't be afraid to ask questions. I know my doctor always said, if you ever have a question, call and one of my nurses can answer it. Or if they
Mm,
can't, they'll get a hold of me because
awesome.
it is very scheduled. You're living by your cycle day and what needs to be done on which day. And if it's off, it could affect the whole process. So just not being afraid to ask the questions or ask them to repeat it. Like the nurse would tell me what the plan would be, and I'd say, okay, I just want to read this back to you so that I make sure I have it correct.
Yeah.
That was something that was really important for me. I'm a very type A planner, so it was good to have a plan and I need to make sure I understand it. Um, Another one would be if it doesn't feel right or something like you need to take a break,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to do that because after my third IUI, I finally said, I can't live by the calendar. Like, it was the end of summer. I said, I need to take a break because I need to be able to spend my month doing other things and not worrying about when I have to rush to the clinic.
Yeah. And
So
you're
that was
going back
something.
to school and adding
Yes.
that back in and stuff. Yeah.
Yep. And just knowing like what you need at the time is super important.
Yeah.
And then don't be afraid to do a little extra research. I know I didn't really at first. I just kind of went with what the doctor said, which wasn't wrong, but
Yeah.
I look at it now and wish I would have paid more attention to the natural stuff before we started that and done it in conjunction with the process to
Yeah.
better prepare myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it sounds to me like you have a very supportive clinic and RE, which is amazing. And that's not everyone's experience, unfortunately, even though it should be. I love that he encouraged you to get in touch and ask questions. And for any of you listening, if that hasn't been put on the table for you, like don't feel like you can't. You get clarification. And the good thing I find with the clinics is the nurses know their stuff because they
Yes,
are
they
the
do.
ones fielding the questions, right? So even if you can't talk directly to your doctor, which is very, very rare in the fertility clinic space, the nurses are often like a better resource for a lot of these questions, especially when it's in relation to timing and medication and side effects and things you might be having. So definitely, definitely, like we say in FCM all the time, like there's no stupid question. Like if you have a question, it's valid because your brain has it. So let's answer it. And that way you can free up some of those like brain calories to think and worry about
Yes.
something else, right?
Like they always said, don't turn to Google, call
Yeah.
us. Please do not turn to Google, just call us.
Yeah, nothing good ever comes from late
No.
night Google sessions. And they don't want you coming and saying, so I read this on Google.
Yes.
What do you think? Because they probably just get that all the time, right? Amazing. Okay, Caitlin, what's next for you guys?
Well, I'm getting I probably have a month or two left with FCM with my 6 months, and I've been really focusing on the natural. I am thinking of possibly doing an IUI. We're actually going on vacation in February, so I'm not doing it then because we'll be gone for 10 days.
Nice.
So we've thought about doing one in March and
Yeah.
seeing how it goes, what hopefully it'll be successful. But then I think we'll maybe have the discussion with my doctor of how many more IUIs do we do?
Yeah.
Because they always told me we'll do three. And if it's not successful, we'll look at the next step. Because if it's not working in three, there's something more.
Yeah.
But since I've been pregnant twice, it reset. I
Okay.
got pregnant with the IUI, so it reset. So I've done one since then. So I
Yeah.
think we'll go back with that and then possibly talk about
What?
IVF
Yeah.
and what's next.
Amazing. Okay, cool. How we end every episode is, what is one piece of advice that you'd love to leave for a couple who is maybe in your shoes right now?
I was thinking about this a lot, and the one thing that really resonates with me is that don't forget, and it's not really fertility based, but it's couple based.
Yeah.
Don't forget who you were as a couple before all of this started. I mean, that we've been through lots of ups and downs, and I've definitely found myself like, oh, more negative about things. The whole process isn't nearly as fun as it used to be.
Mhm. Mhm.
And at the end of the day, like your spouse is there, whether you have a baby or not.
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't ever get to the point where you separate because of this journey. And there are people that do that, but
Yeah.
remember to go on dates and do the things that don't revolve around fertility, because it does eat up so much of your time and your life. And it's an everyday thought.
Yeah.
Take the time to be a couple and just enjoy each other's company.
Yeah, I think that is definitely some of the best advice, because I have definitely seen it become strenuous in relationships. And I think that kind of philosophy of like regardless of how this ends up, like the two of you still have each other. And so fostering that relationship, and we're often prescribing, like we call them non-fertility date nights. So like you don't talk about it, there's no mention of your cycle, there's no chatting about the cost or what's next or the test. Like it's literally off the table for you guys. And the other thing we like to recommend too is thinking about, what are things you used to do together when you first started dating that you maybe don't do anymore because like your relationship has evolved and you've both maybe like gotten busier, or the fertility aspect, especially for you guys that have such a large commute on top of the treatments, like that eats up so much time when you are doing a cycle. Like what's something that's fallen off of what you guys used to love to do together, and how can we reconnect and bring that back in to the relationship? We could talk about this for hours, because I really feel like it is such a huge piece to foster that partnership and remind yourself like we are in this together, and there has to be more to life than just your infertility experience. And using your partner to kind of like help pull you out of that is typically a really good place to start. Amazing, Caitlin. Thank you for sharing. I think this will be so helpful for women who are like, ooh, do I do an IUI? Do I not? Like, what's the process like? I think you painted a really beautiful picture and gave some great tips and tricks and advice. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having
And
me.
we'll chat again soon, okay?
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.